Welcome everyone to our webinar for the Masters in Bioethics and Medical Humanities, and specifically talking about our concentration for medicine, society, and culture. We are very happy to have you with us today. So as we move forward, we have a couple things we're going to talk about today through the webinar. We're going to start with talking about Case Western Reserve University and our School of Medicine. And then we'll move into talking about our concentration and our program. We'll cover student assistantships and the application process and deadlines. We'll talk about Cleveland, and we'll also have Q&A as well. As we're going through the slides and we're talking about the program and the concentration, if you have any questions, I encourage you to submit using the Q&A feature in Zoom. So it's the best way for us to see your questions, and we can either answer them live as we go, or we can type responses to you as we're discussing the program and the concentration. And so some of them we'll address as we talk, and some we'll save till the end. All right, I want to introduce our the folks today. So we have Dr. Jonathan Sadowsky. He is a professor of history here at Case Western Reserve University, and he is also the Associate Director of the Medicine, Society, and Culture Concentration. So thank you, Dr. Sadowsky, for joining us. I am Dr. Leah Jeanette. I am a Senior Research Associate in the Department of Bioethics. I fill a couple of different roles, including working with recruitment and incoming students, but I also teach our clinical ethics rotations course. And I know a lot about our program as well. And then also joining us is Sam Hamilton. She's the Assistant Director of Enrollment and Management for the School of Medicine. So we have lots of different expertise dealing with the program and case and the application process as we go. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Sadowsky, to get us started.
Well, we're going to begin by talking about the setting, which is the Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. You can see the statistics on there. It's a top flight medical school. Might be worth mentioning that it is surrounded. We're going to talk a little bit about the University Circle area later, but I think it's also worth mentioning that the rest of the university is very rich in relevant resources, with an excellent nursing school, excellent dental school, excellent social work school, and a number of people working on medicine, health, and society in the College of Arts and Sciences. So, what are medical humanities and social medicine? So basically, what we try to do in this program is look at questions of health, illness, healing, health disparities, and we try to look at them through the lens of multiple disciplines. And those disciplines include bioethics and philosophy, but they also include humanistic fields like history, narratology, philosophy, literary criticism, as well as social science fields such as anthropology and sociology. I think this is important to stress because there are many medical humanities programs in the country. They've been springing up a lot over recent years. There are also a number of social medicine programs in the country, places where you can study medicine from a social science perspective. There are not that many programs where you can do both, as you can in our program. And we think that gives a pretty distinctive perspective. When you look at, for example, a humanistic concern like narrative structure, and consider that narrative structures don't just appear out of the ether, but they're located in a social position, the social position of the narrator. So we really don't think these things can stand apart from one another, and that's why we strive for such a deeply integrative program. And as for why these matter, I'd love to hear your own answers for that, but I think they matter because I think it's becoming increasingly clear that there is a lot more to medicine than simply technical and scientific knowledge. I think there's a growing recognition of that and the urgency of that. It's also important because it's important to understand that not just in clinical settings, but that health and illness are situated in wider social, structural, cultural settings, and that these differ from one another. They're not all the same, and they have a lot of practical impact on people's health outcomes. So, and this, this next slide really just fleshes out some of the things that that I was talking about for the previous one. The healthcare industry touches us all, and everyone. This is to me, one of the things that's interesting about studying medicine from a social science or humanistic perspective, which is that it matters for everyone because everyone gets sick. Everyone has health maintenance issues. That is a human universal. And over the last 100 to 200 years, there have been enormous advances in science and technology. So about 150 years ago, the germ theory of disease for infectious disease was being established. A little over 100 years ago, X-ray machines were developed. And then, of course, we have all of the much more recent things like brain scanning and so forth. And these advances actually increase the need to study society and culture rather than decrease them. In many ways, the better we know the biology of a given ailment, the more important it becomes to also understand its cultural situation. And technology also has a tendency to, for all its virtues, and we certainly don't engage in science and technology bashing in this program, but for all of the virtues of technology, it can also lead to a sense of distance between the patient and the healer, and decrease the level of clinical dialogue. And there are, of course, ethical issues raised, right? So as lengths of lives go on and people can function in much later stages of life, that raises issues of medical triage on the grandest scale of society. And what are the limits of technology? And how do science and technology impact our need to honor the respect and autonomy and equality of people, not just who are sick, but those who, for example, enroll in research studies? And what are the ethics of these studies? All of these things are bioethical questions, and that's why we are situated in a bioethics department. But it is also a department, and this goes beyond the MSc track in the program. It is also a department that is very committed to multidisciplinarity. That means that bioethics isn't simply a matter for professional philosophers, but it's actually something that is of deep concern to historians, to sociologists, and anthropologists. So in terms of your career path, there are a lot of ways you can go if you complete an MA in this program, and a lot of different ways that people have gone. I would say, at least in the MSc track, there's been a large majority that have gone into some kind of clinical profession. That is, they've gone on to medical school or some other school to learn clinical skills. But there have been lots of others who've gone on to other things. At least one or two are now pursuing bioethics at the academic level, at the PhD level. It's a good bridge to public health work if you want to do work in public health or regulation. And if you're not sure where you're headed, this is a great place to find out, because you get exposed to so many different aspects of, if what you know in the loosest sense is that you're interested in health and medicine and sickness, and you want to make those things better, we can help point you to lots of different ways that you can do this. And I should mention law. A number of our graduates have also gone on to law school, and one of them, for example, is now in law school studying health law.
You know, one other thing I would add is, because of the interprofessional and multidisciplinary nature of bioethics and medical humanities, we also see that reflected in our own faculty. And so our faculty come from very diverse expertise, different education backgrounds. And so, you know, there is, for students who are interested in a lot of different directions, there's probably a faculty who has similar interests and can help talk you through kind of what their area of expertise looks like, and how the bioethics and medical humanities translates into that scope of practice.
Agreed. So this is what the program looks like. It's a one-year program. There's no master's thesis required. It's a coursework master's. We do require a capstone writing project in the second semester. There's the 30 credit hours, of which 13.5 are elective courses. That means you get to choose which courses. The others are set by the requirements of the program. One of the most distinctive aspects of our program, if I were to name two things that make our program most distinct, I would name the multidisciplinarity that we were just talking about, and the clinical ethics rotations, where you actually get into hospital settings. And I think, actually Leah directs that and can speak to that better than I can. I do want to say, though, I'm going to turn things over to her in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to say that in many medical humanities and social medicine kinds of programs across the country do not offer this. And if you're going on to a clinical career, this is really an incredible asset and an incredible kind of experience. But it's also there's a sort of immediacy to it and an experience closeness that would be of importance even if you don't go into a clinical career. Leah, do you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. Yeah. So our clinical ethics rotations, and we have in a couple slides, we'll actually go into a lot more detail. But clinical rotations is, as Dr. Sadowsky said, is an opportunity to really be in the hospitals and really take a look at applied bioethics and medical humanities. So for as much as we, love the discussions we have in the classroom and making sure that students have foundational knowledge of these subject areas, we think it is just as important to have the applied understanding. And so that's the goal of the clinical ethics rotations, is to get students in the hospitals, in the world of healthcare, so that you can see what it looks like for people living and breathing this every day. And then, as you can see on the slide, there's other unique things about our program, which we'll go into more detail as well, including the short-term study abroad immersion. We have personalized advising, and we have something called student assistantships, which is a type of financial aid. But I will say, for our personalized advising, because our faculty are so multidisciplinary, we try to consider what area of bioethics and medical humanities you are interested in and match you to an advisor that makes the most sense. And so you are able to meet with that faculty to talk about your courses, what your interests are, maybe your capstone paper, and career ideas, because as we said, part of the beauty of this program is being able to use it as a way to discern future career paths. So Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit more about the concentration and what makes it so unique?
Absolutely, thank you. So the core course for the MSc track in bioethics is the Foundations of Medicine, Society, and Culture. And that is Dr. Eileen Anderson-Fye and I designed the course about 6 years ago, and we've been teaching it since then. We co-teach it. We find it very helpful in trying to teach this material, to have two disciplines represented in the room. I'm a historian, she's an anthropologist. I'm a humanist, she's a social scientist. And we cover lots of, what we try to do in this course is cover a lot of key texts, but also pair them with, so there's some reading of classic texts, but also we read recent material that tries to apply some of the concepts. So some of the subjects we cover in this foundations course include health disparities, narrative medicine, stigma, the sick role, medicalization, and we look at all of these things from multiple points of view. So that's the key course, that's the core course, and it's structured around critical reading of the texts, which we then discuss in class. There's also something called the MSc seminar, and this is also a bit unusual. This is a very low pressure kind of requirement. It basically means we require you to go to a number of events on campus or in the Cleveland area. We actually opened it up this year so that you could attend a certain number of events out of town remotely in recognition of what's going on. We may retain that, we'll see. But it is important to understand how much is going on this campus regarding medicine, society, and culture. Beyond not just in the bioethics program, but beyond, there are speakers and films and all kinds of events going on. And you can choose which ones you go to. You have to go to 10 of them to complete your requirement. And all you have to do is write up a brief paragraph about what it was like and what you learned there. And then you have to take a certain number of electives related to MSc, and we require a certain amount of balance between humanities and social science. So you have to do both in choosing your electives. Then there's the clinical rotations. Leah, can you talk about optional practicum?
Yeah, so if students, instead of so for clinical ethics rotations, you're actually doing 2 semesters. For your second semester, for students who find a project or an area of study that they're particularly interested in, we do make the option for students to get involved in a practicum. And so you, as the student, would meet with Dr. Anderson-Fye and come up with a practicum project that is related to medicine, society, and culture, and really kind of dive into that world in place of your second semester of clinical ethics rotations. We find that students whose goal is to go on to some type of clinical education, maybe med school or becoming a physician assistant or something like that, they probably will benefit from 2 semesters of clinical rotations. But for those who might be going in a different direction than the clinical world, doing this optional practicum may be a really good fit for you.
And lastly, there's this monthly reading group. I actually run this, and it's article length readings that we read and discuss once a month. It's again, this is very low pressure. You can meet your MSc seminar requirement by attending it as many or as few times as you want. But it's an interesting group because anyone from any department of the university and at any level, we get graduate students, we get faculty, we get clinicians. Sometimes we get people from the community who aren't even involved in the university at all. And either we choose a reading that everyone wants to read, or often and increasingly we read works in progress. So those are sometimes papers that a faculty member is working on, sometimes a chapter of a dissertation that a PhD student might be working on. So you can see here, this is what a typical year would look like, what the distribution of your courses would be like.
And I will add to this, for your electives, as was mentioned, the electives are related in some way to medicine, society, and culture, but they do not have to exclusively be in the Department of Bioethics. So these electives can be taken from across the university, provided they're a graduate level course. So there's a lot of flexibility in what electives you take and how they kind of shape your concentration for your areas of interest.
And there is a list of approved ethics, but if you're interested in a course, say you find you find that the English department in the College of Arts and Sciences is offering a graduate seminar on literature and medicine, and it's not one of the approved electives, pre-approved electives, you can bring it to us and make the argument, and we're pretty flexible about that.
So I'll speak a little bit more about our clinical ethics rotations. So these, as I said before, are a great way to get involved in applied bioethics and medical humanities. So Cleveland itself as a city has 4 major teaching hospital systems. So we have Cleveland Clinic, which is probably the most well-known for folks who are not from the Cleveland area. It is a private hospital. It is quite large. And very highly rated in many different areas of medicine. We have Metro Health, which is the county hospital. And so they see a lot of patients who are underinsured or not insured at all. We have the Veterans Hospital. The VA hospital in Cleveland is actually the 4th largest VA hospital in the entire country. So it's quite an extensive hospital system here in Cleveland. And then lastly, we have university hospitals, which is another private hospital system. And they have quite a large presence in Cleveland as well. And in fact, a lot of UH and Cleveland Clinic buildings are intertwined with Case Western Reserve's campus. And the VA is just a short walk, and then Metro Health is on the west side of the city. So it's just a quick drive. What's great about these rotations is it allows students to experience a many variety of expertise and in the hospital system and understand the many challenging ethical issues that come up. So students have the opportunity to attend morning rounds in a variety of ICUs. That could be a medical ICU, it could be a surgical ICU, it could even be a burn unit or a pediatric or a neonatal ICU. But students can also rotate one-on-one with individuals such as social workers, chaplains. As you can see, the list is quite extensive. But then there's also committee meetings you can go to. And so students are assigned one semester in the fall and then a different semester, or the second semester, a different hospital. And so the goal is to get you at one public, so either Metro or the VA, and then one private, either Cleveland Clinic or UH. And then on a weekly basis, you meet with a clinical ethicist from the hospital system to talk about what you've observed and what you've heard and seen, and be able to wrestle through those kind of ethical challenges that are being faced in the healthcare setting. We also try to match students with what they're interested in. So if we know that a student has particular interest, let's say in emergency medicine or trauma, Metro Health would be a very good location for you because it is a level 1 trauma. They have their Life Flight helicopter system, which is quite large and was one of the first in the country, but they also have the only adult burn unit in Northeast Ohio. And so that might be a good place for you to rotate at as well. So Dr. Sadowsky, do you want to talk about the capstone a little bit?
Sure. So this is basically a research project, and you have a lot of flexibility in how to and how you can choose a capstone project. And when you choose a capstone project, and it can be, it can be in a social science project, it can be a humanities project. You can work across disciplines, but it's a chance to really focus in on an area of passion to you. And I certainly would encourage any student when picking a capstone project to pick a subject very close to their heart. So the idea is to develop, as it says, mastery, but also to, show that you can do a piece of research on your own, organize the material, and come up with something original. You get to choose your capstone advisor. Every capstone is going to have, a project is going to have an advisor. So you will match with the person that you work with well, and the person who really has the expertise to support the project that you're doing. And there is the potential for publication, and some of the projects have been really quite excellent and recommended for publication. And I see that we now welcome our esteemed colleague, Dr. Eileen Anderson-Fye, who is in fact the director of the program, and I only just now noticed that Leah promised to introduce her. So Leah, go ahead.
Oh, it's completely fine. I'm glad that you introduced her. Welcome, Dr. Eileen Anderson-Fye, to join us today.
Hi, it is a delight to be here. I see you've gone through most of it, so I will hang out. I am the Director of Educational Programs for the Department of Bioethics and Medical Humanities, the Director of the MA program, and together with Jonathan Sadowsky, the Director of the Medicine, Society, and Culture Concentration. So I just had the great privilege of helping mint a brand new PhD, which was very exciting. So I'm going to hand it back over, but I will be here to contribute to questions and answers, or anything else. But it's great to see we're in the video. I can't see your faces, but it's great to see the names of those of you who are here. And I'm sure you were told you can send in questions or comments, and we're happy to help field those. And if there's any other point, Dr. Sadowsky or Dr. Jeanette, that you feel I should speak to, I'm happy to do that at the conclusion.
Great, thank you so much. I'll move us along and just quickly mention, we have one other concentration in our master's program. So students are not required to choose a concentration. They are allowed the flexibility of additional electives, but we do have a concentration that focuses on research ethics. And so similarly to the MSc concentration, there's a core course that you would take. They also have a journal club that gets together to discuss research ethics projects and articles. They also have electives that are related to research ethics. And then in the second semester, there is a practicum in place of one of the clinical ethics rotations. This allows students to get embedded within possibly an IRB or a research project at either a hospital in the area or at Case Western Reserve itself. And students have gone on to do some really great work in their practicum, including publishing some of the work they've done.
Dr. Jeanette, did you talk about the possibilities for the Medicine, Society, and Culture practicum? Or did Dr. Sadowsky?
We talked about it just a little bit, but I would love for you to talk about it because I know that you have really worked with students on these practicums for the MSc concentration.
Thank you. Just a quick word. So in that second semester practicum, the vast majority of our students are going to do these incredible clinical rotations that we have set up. That's really something very, very special about this program. But if you are a preclinical student going on to medical school, or nursing or some other kind of clinical practice, usually that's a really good idea. And even for a lot of our students who are going on to a PhD or a JD or a nonprofit, they want that kind of exposure in the hospital setting, but not every student. So for example, some of our students who are going on to get a PhD would rather have some more in-depth research experience where their final project may be a publishable paper. So we've had a number of students do that. I've had pre-law students who really want to like do a practicum in health law, or folks who want to work at the Department of Public Health or a homeless shelter or other kinds of areas. So there are other options if you're a medicine, society, and culture concentrator, and if another kind of practicum experience would be the best move for you in your career path. So that is where you work closely with your advisor and with me as the director of the program to figure out what is the best practicum experience for you. Back to you, Dr. Sadowsky.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have a really great follow-up question to the clinical ethics rotations that was mentioned that I would love for us to just quickly answer, and then we can jump back into the rest of the presentation. But we had a question, if there were clinical rotation options regarding bone marrow transplant clinics. And I think it's what this question is getting at is how customizable are the clinical ethics rotations? And what I would say is we absolutely take into consideration student interests. And at each of the hospital settings, if there is something in particular that you are interested in seeing and it may not be on the list, it doesn't mean that it's not available. It just means we haven't had it come up yet. And so I would love for us to have the opportunity to get a student that's interested in this bone marrow transplant clinic to be able to rotate there and spend time there. So I think that would be a great opportunity for you and for us to also learn about the ethical challenges that come up with that type of issue.
Yeah, that's so well said, Dr. Jeanette. And, you know, so for example, another case that came to mind is actually a pair of students who had real interest in hospice and end-of-life care and actually environmental ethics on top of that. And we were able to design, you know, a pretty cool, both practicum and with a research component, and we're moving into publication on that particular piece right now. Lucky for those of us here today, Dr. Jeanette is our course director for the clinical ethics rotations and is incredibly knowledgeable about our 4 hospital system partners and the subspecialties within them. And we're lucky as a department that we have such a diverse faculty with many collaborations that we work very creatively to help students get the kind of experiences they need to get from where they are walking into their next step. So I think you answered that really well about how customizable can we be.
So I can take this next question that comes up in the Q&A, unless we want to take that later.
Go right ahead, Dr. Sadowsky. It's a great question.
Yeah, so the question is, how does the capstone differ from an empirically based thesis? If I understand the question correctly, I think the main difference is really the scale of it. A normal master's thesis is a year-long project, and so the capstone project is a semester-long project, and that puts certain limits on how much research you can do. It's still going to be empirically based in some way, although the kind of data that's going to be used could be very different depending on what kind of disciplinary perspective you're trying to do. If you're doing something having to do with literature and medicine, that's going to be very different from the kind of data you're going to use if you want to study health disparities, for example.
And I think that's exactly right. And I would add on, you know, a capstone has a little more flexibility. It doesn't necessarily, even though it would require independent analysis and independent argumentation, it doesn't necessarily require independent research. Some people really want to do that. For other people, they are better served. Like, let's say you are, you know, I was just having a meeting with a student who really wants to be a neurologist. And so for that student's capstone, we are really focusing in around neuroethics. And that student is going to do a very comprehensive literature review in the area of neuroethics to set them up well for heading into medical school in this case. So there, the literature review comes up in a capstone, in a way where it would be backgrounded in other kinds of theses. So there's some, again, kind of ability for customization, depending on your career and educational goals.
Oh, so yeah, I think one of you two would probably handle study abroad better than I.
Dr. Jeanette, why don't you talk about this, since you have been our director?
Yes, so our study abroad courses are a great opportunity for students to experience applied bioethics and medical humanities, but also do a cultural comparison at the same time. And we have developed these courses to take place either over winter break, spring break, or after the semester ends in May, so May, what we call May abroad. And it allows students to do a deep dive into the culture and a particular area of bioethics and medical humanities within the context of that location. So for instance, the courses that go to the Netherlands, in no surprise, a lot of it focuses around drugs, it focuses around sex work, it focuses around public health, women's health, and the ethical challenges that come with that, and the stark contrast to kind of how we approach those things here in the US. Dr. Anderson-Fye created a course that focuses on the national parks, particularly talking about environmental ethics and human health. I think what's amazing about being in Cleveland is that we have been able to transition it to not only a national park, Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which is near us in Cleveland, but also to the local parks, the Cleveland Metro Park system and county parks as well.
So there's another great question in the Q&A about healthcare disparities in developing countries, and how would the curriculum and advisor help you focus on that topic? I am probably a good one to take that. I am actually a psychological and medical anthropologist. I have been working in Belize, Central America for 25 years, and I have worked in 8 other countries, mostly in the developing world. So we actually have 3 cultural medical anthropologists in-house on faculty at our department. Many of us look at exactly those topics in different ways. My colleague, Dr. Patty Marshall, has looked at biobanking and ethical issues in research in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a lot of expertise in-house. We actually have courses. We're doing one this spring about that will have some global perspective about racial justice and medicine. There's a variety, but we also have faculty affiliated with our department throughout the university who are in departments like global health, public health, anthropology, sociology, the School of Nursing, other places, actually biomedical engineering, where some of the biomedical innovations are applied and students actually go to the developing world to help launch them. So there are a number of connections and faculty we have doing that kind of work. Our program, obviously, we are in a global pandemic, so this is not true this year. But just a couple of years ago, our master students came from how many, was it 22 countries, Dr. Jeanette, for our class of 60? So many of those students were from developing countries, etc. So we're well acquainted with that. And what I would recommend is, if you have an interest in your application process, you can make that clear, and we would be able to talk with you. We're really concerned in our department and in our program that people find the right fit. So we would work with you to make sure that there would be the kind of right fit in terms of coursework and in terms of experiences that you would get. I will say, I'm not sure if it was already mentioned, that the diversity at the 4 hospitals is really exceptional too. A very large international population, refugee population. I had a student actually do a different kind of practicum in refugee health at one of our major centers for refugees in Cleveland. So there are, again, there's a lot of customization available, and we would be able to help you sort out exactly who are the right people for you along the way.
I just wanted to quickly add that I also have international research experience and familiar with particularly African settings, and I study mental health in a comparative perspective. So if that interests anybody.
So I'll just quickly mention that along with our master's program, if students are interested in pursuing a dual degree, we do have partnerships with other programs at Case Western Reserve University. One of the things to make sure you note, though, is that you must apply and to each program and then gain acceptance independent of each other. So for students who are interested in applying to the MD school or the law school, they have their own process for application and acceptance. And then you could also apply to do our master's program along the way.
So I'm going to respond to another relevant right now and excellent question about if my goal is a PhD. Do you recommend starting this program first or continue with application plans for a PhD? In this case, research ethics. I will say that, first of all, we do have students who do a dual degree, just like what was mentioned a second ago. And we have a lot of students who do our MA and then are more competitive when they go out to a PhD. So for example, if you were to do you're interested in research ethics and you did the research ethics MA, you already have not only kind of academic classroom knowledge, but you have been in a clinical setting or an academic setting doing directly relevant IRB work. In our experience, students who have done that have actually gone on to work at or even run IRBs, but also are more competitive for a PhD program. When we look at the medical humanities and medical social sciences, a piece of feedback that we have gotten consistently on the national level, or bioethics PhDs or medical humanities PhDs, we consistently get the feedback from our alum and from our national faculty partners that they are very excited to get our students because they know what they're talking about. They know what's happening in the clinical world. They're not coming in to critique the clinic without having seen some of the real dilemmas and problems and scarcities and on the ground kind of issues and dilemmas and structural problems that are hard to imagine unless you've been kind of in it. We get that feedback, by the way, from our medical applicants too, that the medical schools love that our students have had this kind of in-depth on the ground experience, so they know what they're getting into. What I would say is you are welcome to give us a call or shoot us an email at bioethics@case.edu, and we can help you figure out for you what would maybe be your best bet. Again, our investment is that the students, everybody finds a good fit for your particular, positionality, your goals, whether you know what you want or you're trying to discern it and figure it out. that is our investment with you. And I think that's why we have a very high satisfaction rate with the program. By the time you join us, you know what you're getting into, and we're pretty sure there's a very good fit about to happen. But for most people, doing the MA makes them more competitive for a PhD. But I could imagine scenarios where one might do a joint degree or some other instantiation. Okay, I'm going to talk about financial aid quickly. One thing that's very unique in our MA program is that we actually do offer student assistantships that help to offset your tuition. These are opportunities for students to do teaching, research, or kind of program administrative opportunities. So for example, a couple of my research assistants who have these assistantships, I am actually working on publishing, co-authored papers right now. Other people are getting hands-on research experience at the master's level, which is not always possible at something like, an R1 kind of top level research university. We also have our students assist us in teaching and get teaching experience. And actually, it just so happens, we have also, we published on that on some of our very early undergraduate level medicine, society, and culture oriented classes, where our graduate assistants were also with me in the classroom helping me teach. So those they're kind of a hybrid between need, and they are competitive based on merit, where you can get a partial offset of tuition doing these other kinds of roles in the department that generally really are a win-win. They're good for students' experiences and career development. They're good for the department and the kind of intellectual life of the Department of Bioethics and related fields. There's also the other kinds of graduate level funding that are pretty standard, and our Department of Financial Aid and Graduate Studies is very good to help identify the kinds of grants and loans and scholarships, et cetera, that you can get. Every year, our program is, the way that it's structured and scheduled, we're accommodating people like dual degree students who are in medical school or law school at the same time. It also accommodates those who are working part-time or even full-time along the way, depending on your particular situation. And that is something that's usually best, figured out on an individual basis. But there are some opportunities, which is nice.
So I'll move us to talk a little bit about the application process. I see that we have a couple more questions come in, and I just want to make sure we get through these other slides before we turn to open the Q&A back up. So for our application process, we have required materials. So transcripts from all undergrad and grad programs. Your statement of purpose is going to be 1 to 2 pages of what your interest of bioethics and medical humanities is, where it comes from, kind of the why, but also how does this program and those areas of study fit into your career path. We'll also require a CV or your resume, and then 2 letters of recommendation, including 1 faculty. I see we have a typo there, but nonetheless, it's 2 letters of recommendation. One thing we did do this year because of the pandemic is we have made test scores optional. So that is not a requirement for this year. We know that accessing GREs, MCAT tests, LSATs, whatever it might be, can be challenging. And so we have made those optional. Once a completed application is submitted, we will have it reviewed by a member of our admissions committee, and then there is an interview with someone as well, either telephone or via Zoom. We are hopeful, and the goal is always to get an answer for you as quickly as possible. you know, the goal is within 2 to 3 weeks of having a submitted application that you would hear from us to get the interview scheduled, have it take place, and then get you a decision rendered as quickly as we can. And then I just want to highlight some of the deadlines that we have approaching. So our first priority deadline is December 1st. If you submit a completed application by December 1st, that means all pieces are submitted, including letters of recommendation, we will get you a decision before the end of the year. And so you can go into 2021 knowing the decision for your application. We also then have other application deadlines, including the integrated graduate studies for current undergrads at Case Western Reserve. We have a priority 2 deadline of May 15th. If you're planning to apply for the student assistantships, the deadline for that is June 1. And then our final deadline is August 1st, and classes begin at the end of August. I can't believe we're already talking about August 2021. Seems like just yesterday it was August of this year. So Dr. Anderson-Fye, do you want to talk a little bit about Cleveland, and then we can move on to Q&A again?
Yes, hopefully we will be back in Cleveland, everyone. I'm here now. And a number of our students are in Cleveland, others are remote during the pandemic. But of course, we're optimistic that next fall we would all be together again. Cleveland, for those of you who have not been here or not from here, is such an amazing city. Our students love it. Our campus is really vibrant. The School of Medicine, the School of Graduate Studies, the entire campus is in an area called University Circle, where we have like the Cleveland Museum of Art, you know, was just ranked out like the #2 museum in the United States after the Met. We, of course, think it's #1. We've got the Cleveland Orchestra right across the street. Playhouse Square, the 2nd largest theater district in the United States. It's the largest after New York City. So we get first run Broadway when we get it back. We all got to see Hamilton, etc. We've got phenomenal major league sports. And I should say all of these things have student tickets where they are either free or reduced cost tickets for you. We've got just amazing, we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We have, let you see there are a couple of our areas with great restaurants, very accessible. We also have a tremendous, we've got a national park not too far down the street. And we've got a ring of what are called metro parks, which last year, you know, again, won a ranking of best in the country for kind of city-related parks. You go in the middle of there and feel like, you know, you're in the wilderness. It is delightful. So Cleveland is a great city for young professionals. Great music scene too. When we get back to all of that, it's a really high quality of life with a very reasonable cost of living for all of its amenities. And, you know, I could go on and on about Cleveland, so we'll go ahead and advance the slide, but we're happy to answer any questions. So now we're going to take some Q&A. I'm going to go back to a couple of questions that are already in the chat. One of them is about the clinical rotations and how much time are they a week, and how do students, our alum, feel about the balance between rotation and other coursework. So the clinical rotations in person are 80 hours per semester, and that includes your time in the clinical settings. It also includes your precepting time or didactic time. So that's demanding. So 160 hours by the time you finish the program. Most of our alum will all, and actually, Dr. Jeanette, I don't know if you mentioned, we just had a recent alumni panel that when the recording is available, we will make available for others to listen to it, because you can hear from the alumni themselves, which we'll post on our website, and they can tell you about it. For most, the clinical rotations are one of the most rewarding parts of the whole experience because they are so rich and meaningful. The courses and the coursework is designed, we've run this program, this is our 25th anniversary of the program. We know what it takes to do the clinical rotations. We know what it takes in the classroom. And most students find that it works out fine. I can't even think of any particular conflicts we've had in recent years, but we're always there to brainstorm around them. Like if you were doing some particular kind of specialty where there was a conflict, but our required courses are designed to not be in conflict with what you might do for a rotation. So if you want to talk about that, any more, you can go ahead and contact us individually. There's a great question about opportunities tailored for someone interested in geriatrics, gerontology, Alzheimer's, ethics. We have a tremendous focus in this area. And there's also the question about pediatrics. Our department is designed to cover the entire life cycle. And in your foundations class, we begin with, conception and birth, and we go through death and dying. Some of us, like myself, are experts on adolescence. Our colleague, Dr. Stuart Youngner, is one of the foremost experts on gerontological ethics and death and dying. I would point out, if you have a particular interest in that area, that not only do we offer, so for example, in January term, Dr. Erin Lamb, one of our spectacular new additions to the department, is teaching a course on death and dying. That looks like it's going to be very well subscribed, and that's her area of scholarships. We've got multiple in-house scholars. I would also point you to places like the Department of Sociology, which is one of the top departments in medical gerontological sociology in the country, and those courses can count for your electives in our program. But that is really true at any stage of the life cycle, whether you're interested in maternal and infant health, or child, pediatric health, adolescent, different kinds of adult issues. We have, by design, in-house expertise across the entire life cycle, and all of us collaborate with the people across the university and region that focus in those areas. So again, if you have specific individual questions, feel free to ask us. So we've got a question about how might completing this program in conjunction with an MD affect possible career paths following graduation. So our in-house faculty member who is an MD and an ethicist, who is our primary coordinator for the dual degree, may have more detailed answers than I do. But what we hear from our alum and our MD/MAs are a few different things. One is just, and our MAs who go on to do MDs, it makes them better docs. It gives them a better perspective for the rest of their career, as well as these areas are shown to improve professionalism and physician well-being, actually, and reduce physician burnout. There's there's an empirical data set for that. But in terms of their career paths, a lot of them will go to serve on the ethics board at their hospital or their clinical setting. They will actually do research and continue collaboration and publication in this area. And some of them will split their time, do clinical ethics, along with clinical practice. So I don't know, Dr. Jeanette, if you want to add anything to that, or Dr. Sadowsky.
Well, I just wanted to add quickly that I think that another benefit is that if research is part of your agenda post MD, having this background would give you more versatility as a researcher. You'd be able to relate so many more fields into your work.
Absolutely.
And I would just add too that we have consistently heard from students, not only that have done our program and applied to medical school for the next step, or that have done our program alongside their MD and are applying to residency, that they've sat in interviews and the questions they ask sometimes only pertain to the bioethics and medical humanities. We had a student who was a recent graduate who applied for emergency medicine, and she said her entire residency interview was all about the bioethics and her experience and time there and what contributions she could make in bioethics to the hospital system. So that was very, very flattering to hear from her.
I have another thing to add here, which is that we, many students come into our program with extensive background in the humanities and very good writing skills, but some don't. And some of the ones who have come mainly from science backgrounds haven't had a lot of experience writing. And we give you that experience and we work with you hard on the writing. And many students have said that that was really pivotal for them. And you're going to need writing skills regardless of your professional path.
Thank you. Dr. Jeanette, could we advance to I'm aware of the time and we will continue to answer questions, but I do want you to have the email of where to continue to ask questions. I'm going to take the easy question first, which is, are courses offered over the summer? Yes, they are. We do offer, as Dr. Jeanette said before, we offer May term classes. So those are intensive courses that happen during May. Some of those are abroad, some of those are local. There are also various types of summer courses that we do offer, or that, someone may have a reason to need to do their clinical rotations during the summer, or other reasons, other courses or other independent studies. So the answer to that one is yes. And in fact, because it's a school of medicine, the configuration of courses is a little more flexible than what a lot of people are used to in their undergraduate experience, for example, in a College of Arts and Sciences. So again, we could talk with you about your individual situation. We have another question about someone who just applied to the MD program to start in fall 2021. Good for you, sending you best thoughts. And, how can you do the dual degree? Absolutely, you can do the dual degree. And we have a lot of experience with doing that. So for example, our 6-credit foundations course each semester is offered on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. There's some asynchronous components that we actually piloted during pandemic that we're going to continue to offer. But we are fully ready if a student wants to complete the MA along with their MD in a 4-year period, by using summertime and using, some of the creative options we have, using intensive courses. It is completely possible. And we would be happy to put you in touch with the MDMA advisor who has coached, dozens and dozens of students through that process.
So there's a question about scholarships to help with travel costs for the study abroad courses. So there are scholarships out there. Our department itself does not offer scholarships, but there are scholarships through the Office of Study Abroad, Education Abroad, through the Center for International Affairs. There are also private scholarships that are out there that you can apply for. And students can also work with financial aid if they need to adjust their financial aid options to include the cost for the study abroad courses as well.
So I think at this point, we're a little bit over time. We will conclude. And even though I kind of jumped on after the fact, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Leah Jeanette, who you will get to know if you are applying to or come to our program, who is a phenomenal clinical ethicist and administrator and human being. So we are very lucky to have her. And Dr. Sadowsky, who is one of our most distinguished faculty at Case Western Reserve, top-notch medical historian, who, as you could tell from this webinar, is very hands-on, not only helped design some of our programming, but is one of our most beloved teachers and actually won a phenomenal university-wide award for his work teaching in this program recently, and is a delight to be with. And I don't know that you've heard from another person you would get to know, but I also want to thank Samantha Hamilton, who keeps us all together and who may interface with you in various ways in the application process. So thank you, team, and to everyone hanging in there right now. You know, please shoot us an email or tell us what you're interested in. If you start an application and run into a problem, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to getting to know you, helping to figure out if this is a good fit for you. And we certainly wish everyone good holidays and to stay safe and healthy, which is all of our top priority.
And I would just like to close by saying that in addition to using the email on the slide, anyone who wants to contact me personally, jonathan.sadowsky@case.edu, I'm happy to arrange either just by email or phone call. And I also wanted to say, since Dr. Anderson-Fye said all those nice things about us, that she makes this program go. She's the director. She's also an award-winning teacher, multiple award-winning teacher. And if you choose this program for no other reason, her energy level has to be seen to be believed. You'll be talking about it for decades.
Thank you, everyone.